So, good morning and welcome to Jack Shakespeare on Monkhouse Mondays. Jack, I have to say this: you are looking incredibly distinguished. You've managed lockdown far better than I have. Jack, just tell the audience, what is it that you do with UK Active?
David, thank you very much, and thanks for the invite. And I'll take that as a backhanded compliment. I work for UK Active. I'm the director of Children, Young People and Families. I'm also the director of the UK Active Research Institute, and I sit on the executive leadership team. I mean, broadly, I work across the organisation, across departments across the organisation, but also very closely and strategically with our members, our key stakeholders and partners. Ultimately, from a CYP perspective, to unlock as many opportunities for children to be as active as possible.
Brilliant. And I know as we go into the conversation, there's been a few bits in the headlines recently, some good headlines for the CYP element of this. So, but before we do that, just talk about how you've managed to remain active during lockdown.
Blimey, yeah, good question. I've got 4-year-old triplets at home, so we've got three little boys. I've got all the energy in the world, so the bulk of my physical activity, David, has come from trying to keep up with them. But actually, on that note, I've got to say my motivation to be active since having the boys has changed quite dramatically, and it is genuinely to keep up with them as much as I can and be as active as a dad as I can. And I think the other thing that's changed for me, we've largely been working from home, since sort of mid-March to end March. I've replaced what would be my normal train commute in the morning with a run in the morning, which has been really good, actually. I've got to say, I've really felt the difference. A good way to start the day.
It does make a difference, and it is interesting, isn't it? I remember being a 40-year-old dad and thinking I need to remain fit and healthy so I can keep up with my daughter. And we've just got back an hour of tennis, and it really does. Kids make a real difference to your desire to be physically active and to be with them doing stuff, doesn't it? It's fantastic. So, which of course links into exactly what we wanted to talk about. So this whole agenda, we've seen some really interesting news recently about the premium, the sports premium. We've also seen some stuff around narrowing the gap between genders for children on physical activity. So how is all this happening? Why is it happening?
Good question. I think the good news that the headlines recently have been largely around. So last weekend we saw the commitment to the PE and sport premium from the Department for Education, which is great. So that's the £320 million of funding ring fenced into primary schools to support PE, sport and physical activity. I think although before we get carried away with that, that's great, but it's still just 1 year. And I think we need to work very hard now to make sure we're not in the same place this time next year in regards to prospect of no funding in schools for that, and back that up with a much longer term plan. To your second point, I think this whole lockdown experience has started to show new behaviours and new attitudes amongst children and young people about physical activity. I think we didn't have a great starting point. Pre-lockdown, less than half of all children, certainly in England, between the ages of 5 and 16, less than half were getting 60 active minutes. So we didn't have a great start, and there was clearly a lot of work to be done, pre-lockdown. During lockdown, those numbers have dwindled. We're looking at only about 19%, 20% of all children and young people actually getting enough physical activity per day. So there's 60 active minutes. But I think to your point about girls, there are some green shoots, just early indicators, and albeit based on relatively low sample sizes. But what we have seen, whilst the system has been shut, I guess, so I say system, the education system largely, although schools have never really closed, but that and also that wider community sport and physical activity system, we've seen some green shoots. We've seen girls reporting sort of higher levels of not just physical activity, but their attitudes towards physical activity and their option towards physical activity. And actually, we've seen, and in Sport England survey that was published last week, we've seen that girls are much more likely than boys at the moment to indicate that they are enjoying physical activity and getting involved in it. albeit not near nowhere near, still nowhere near the levels that we want it to be.
Yeah.
On that note, we're also seeing children from BAME backgrounds finding more opportunities to be physically active and enjoying physical activity at the time, for reasons we're not sure yet. But I think, what it does start to do is it starts to raise some questions that we really need to explore. What is it about this environment of lockdown that is to your question, David, is providing maybe a better platform for girls to be physically active? What is it about lockdown that's doing that? And what does it say about what does that say about the system? What does that say about the system, the pre-lockdown system?
Absolutely.
that clearly doesn't cater for all groups of children and young people? Clearly doesn't provide that support for all groups of children and young people. And why now, with the system shut, I guess effectively, are we seeing some signs of those groups actually finding a bit more enjoyment in physical activity?
Yeah, and I think, Jack, actually that works across all, doesn't it? I see my neighbours out walking, I see them running, I see them cycling. Most of them probably weren't gym members beforehand, so they're just finding that opportunity to get physically active. My daughter actually is the other way around. She loves team sport, so she's missed the hockey, she's missed the netball. We've tried to get back to tennis as soon as we can, which has been great. But it is, isn't it? It's outside of the tradition that we're finding physical activity being offered effectively in very different ways. And I guess that as we move into the summer holidays, that's something we can almost work with now. Is what is attracting kids to do something differently? How can we maximise that opportunity? Because as we move into the summer, we get into play schemes and the guidance that we need around play schemes. So are we that agile? Can we start changing what we're supporting and changing the guidance to maximise what we're hearing from this piece around narrowing the gap?
Yeah, I think we can be as agile as we want to be. It takes a bit of will, and the ambition to do that. I think the summer's a prime opportunity to start to do that. I think this summer is a very important period of time for many reasons. I think what government have realised and are starting to realise just how much childcare our sector provides during summer holidays. Beyond the sport and physical activity that's delivered as a vehicle, I think it's become really obvious that in the face of albeit even 2 weeks ago, in the face of having no guidance to deliver holiday programs, I think government quickly realised that childcare would be a real issue this summer as it encourages more people to get back to work. I think summer holidays is always a pinch point, particularly for the most vulnerable children and young people. They are most affected by that 6-week summer holiday gap. So the importance to support those children and young people during that time is really clear. And specifically in this climate, the summer holiday period is going to be a really important transition point as children are expected and asked to go back into school in September, with some, at the moment, facing 23, 24 weeks out of the system, without any connection to any structured activity. So I think this summer holiday is going to be exceptionally important for all those reasons. I think a really good opportunity for our sector to really show how it can be agile to all those needs, how it can provide that childcare, but some really inclusive, very creative and innovative physical activity options for children and young people, harnessing some of the learnings that we're having around girls' participation and diversifying the programs that we're delivering, and now with guidance that came out from the Department for Education last week, which is great, and we support the department on that. There's a real opportunity and a framework there to deliver some quality programming. I think it'll be interesting. I think there's a big job. The next big job, there's many big jobs, but the next big job is sort of navigating that guidance, and that guidance is very much around, the bubble model and working with groups, small groups of children, so less about social distancing, more about bubbles, navigating that, but then also interpreting any guidance that might come out in the next few days around other indoor facilities, and how they work together. I think that's going to be a really important part, and certainly here at UK Active, we will work with our members, operators, to make sure that that guidance is interpreted as best as it can, and we can plan for safe delivery.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I have the absolute pleasure of assessing the children's code of practice, the kids' code of practice. And that, you know, if you would, even without the assessment process, if you were just to get hold of that guidance that you guys have produced at UK Active and just take the steps through that around how you structure governance, how you operate, how you measure what you do, and how you review and learn and listen to the young people that are taking part, just by using that guidance would be really valuable. And then attaching that with, as you say, the new guidance around bubbles and around how to operate these summer schemes. I think there's some really interesting stuff on there. So have you put the education guidance on your website? Is it at UK Active if people are looking for it?
Yeah, it is, David. Thanks for that. So yeah, so if you go into the COVID-19 support section on the UK Active website, there is the UK Active Kids Safe Operating Framework that links to that Department for Education guidance. Yeah, the UK Kids team have produced that, and actually that was given to the Department for Education some 6 weeks ago for them to use as a point of reference, particularly for our sector. The DfE guidance is very general. It's as much for an arts and crafts sort of provision as it is for sports and physical activities. So we've taken that, we've adapted it to be specific for our sort of sector provision. And that sits on that COVID-19 section. So it's there for everyone to have a look at and use as a reference point for the preparation of safe delivery this summer.
Absolutely. And I think on top of that, it is about having a look at the rest of the research and insight that's out there. That piece around activity, I think, is really important when we start thinking about what we put on as this activity. Because I think, as much as my daughter is incredibly confident, and she'll play football during lunchtimes and things like that, there's still that little bit about her that doesn't want to do it where boys are there, and that type of stuff. It's conscientious, about who she is. So it's really interesting. We've got a couple of minutes left, Jack. So you've always classed me as somebody who looks to the future. You're always looking at what is the next step? Where do we actually take this? So give me your desire for the future. As a result of COVID, what could we really make a difference post-COVID to children and young people and physical activity?
Yeah. So we talk about looking to the future, but I'll start that with my 2 minutes to actually look back and say, the first thing we need to do is learn from this experience and learn from that insight that we're getting through now about children's behaviours and attitudes towards physical activity during lockdown. Hopefully, we'll never get this opportunity again to learn from such a unique situation. So we've got to learn from that and use that to then look ahead. And on that note of looking ahead, I think bottom line, we've got to be absolutely unwavering in our collective attempts to tackle inequalities. It is still absolute stubborn inequalities, particularly around children from low-income backgrounds that are not showing high levels of physical activity. That has got to be an absolute constant in our battle here to really look at how do we engage children and young people in physical activity. We've got to be unwavering in that. I think looking ahead, I think there's a real opportunity here and a big challenge to better bridge school sport and physical activity, community sport and physical activity. They shouldn't sit as islands, and I know there are great examples of where that connection is around the country, but it's quite disparate, and I think there's an opportunity to coordinate that better and really bridge the two together. And there's some great examples of that, and I think actually you referred to it, David, in our last recovery report webinar about operators having a role in that and going beyond their four walls and out of their facilities and into local communities. And as I say, it does happen. I know Scott and the guys up at Link for Life in Greater Manchester do a great job in reaching out into the community and then sort of that link back to facilities. So that bridge between school and community sport and physical activity, I think, is really important, and that then wraps in workforce, that wraps in facilities, that wraps in the program and the groups that we want to engage. And then lastly, just to close off, and apologies for sort of preaching the good word, but we have to be really ambitious and bold in our approach here. We've got a school sport and activity action plan, but that needs to be a national coordinated strategy that puts children and young people at the heart of it, that stimulates collaboration across the country. We've got a brilliant workforce. We've got brilliant organisations that really want to and believe in this cause. We need a national strategy that comes from government that really joins that up, stimulates that collaboration, and puts children's physical activity at the heart of it, with the voice of children with it. And we do need to be really, really bold with that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting point to end, because lots of kids have had lots of time on their own, in their own little bubble, with their laptop in the dining room, and this is a great opportunity to re-energise and re-socialise our young people as well. So Jack, thank you so much for your time. Really good to talk to you. You take care. We'll see you soon.
You too, Joe. Thanks.